Let's go. Yes, sir. We're back. NFL Week 1 for this 2025 NFL season. And today we're going to be talking about what we learned from NFL Week 1. A lot of great matchups, a plethora of great games in this slate, a lot of divisional matchups. It kicked off with the Dallas Cowboys against the Philadelphia Eagles, where the Eagles won on Thursday Night Football. But then I think we saw the game of the year on Sunday Night Football between the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills, where the Bills won on a game-winning field goal, coming back from a 15-point deficit with 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter. It was absolutely sensational what the Bills offense was able to conjure up, and from their defense creating a key turnover on Derrick Henry in the fourth quarter. That was a great game. I think the second best game of the weekend was between the Steelers and the Jets, an unexpected matchup, but a reunion of a game where Aaron Rodgers faced his former team and the Jets beating them, and where Justin Fields, he had a great game playing against his former team last year in the Pittsburgh Steelers. That was a great game. You had a lot of other great matchups between the Bucs and Falcons, where Baker Mayfield and Emeka Egbuka were able to have a great connection and rapport and win that game over the Falcons after being swept by the Falcons last year. But the Bucs, they have won that NFC South for 4 consecutive seasons and trying to make it 5 this year. You had the 49ers and Seahawks in the NFC West divisional matchup right there, where the 49ers were able to win 17-13, trying to get things back together after missing the playoffs last year due to injuries and things of that nature too. And then another great game, well, in terms of an unexpected dominance of a game, with the Packers dominating the Detroit Lions, winning 27-13. Micah Parsons debuted in that game, had a profound impact immediately. Just his presence on the field alone made things easier for Rashawn Gary, Luke Van Ness, Edgerrin Cooper. That whole defensive front, the Packers, they have a great opportunity to do something special this season and have an opportunity to take over the NFC North over the Lions, who have won it the past couple of seasons, but as we all know, they've lost both of their coordinators, and their offense did look a little pedestrian against the Packers. So we'll see about how things go there, but it's a lot of great games to talk about in every single scope, and I'm looking forward to it. This is the perfect opportunity for me to also say, go check out all of my 32 NFL season preview videos that I made for every team, all 8 divisions that I made going into this season, because it's going to be interesting to compare those videos to how these teams end up doing to what I initially predicted. But we also have to recognize and say that this is week 1. We don't want to overreact to everything. I always say we really don't have a proper judgment on how teams and seasons are going to go really until that week 7 to 10 area, because that's really when you're getting close to around the middle of the season and when teams go on runs and when you also see the most dominant teams. But there was a lot of great showings from a lot of great teams, and there was a lot of great play from different quarterbacks unexpectedly, like a Daniel Jones who played great. Justin Fields played great in that Steelers and Jets matchup. Elite quarterback play between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. And just overall, I think the epitome of high-level football being played in this NFL Week 1. But with that being said though, guys, before I get further into this NFL Week 1 recap, make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and X at SwaggyRuss, and TikTok at SwaggyRuss2 for shorts, reels, and all type of content like that. This is the first video for this NFL Week 1 recap series, but as you know, we'll be doing it for every single week on Tuesdays and throughout the postseason, and finally wrapping up after the Super Bowl too as well. We recapping every single game that takes place from the previous slate, so stay tuned for that, guys. Been doing this series for now a 4th season in a row since 2022, so I'm just looking forward to the amazing season that this will be in 2025 that'll end up culminating in Super Bowl 60 in Santa Clara, so y'all stay tuned for that. But with that being said, let's talk about what we learned from NFL Week 1. For the first game that kicked off the 2025 NFL season, we had the matchup between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys, and the Eagles won that game 24-20. A long game, I might add, because of the lightning delay, but I think a lot of people have been talking about how shocked they were about how good the Dallas Cowboys played, and I've said this frequently a lot of times throughout this offseason and the season preview videos that I've made for not only the Cowboys, but just throughout several talking points about the Cowboys. This team, as long as Dak Prescott stays healthy, they're going to be a playoff team. As long as a majority of their key players stay healthy, things of that nature too. And I know a lot of people, they probably didn't expect anything out of Brian Schottenheimer, but you have to realize, guys, this is his 28th year as a coach in the NFL. Yes, this is his first time being an NFL head coach, but his dad was Marty Schottenheimer, one of the better coaches in the 90s, and when he was a head coach with the Chiefs and the Browns and things of that nature too. Schottenheimer has been around the game since he was young, so that's why you got to see a lot of this stuff with the Cowboys, which I'll talk about them more in a second, but I want to focus on the team that did win this game, in the Philadelphia Eagles. And we know this team is a run-first team. We saw that with Saquon Barkley having the amazing 2,000-yard rushing season that he had last year in 2024, and I will say the Cowboys, they really made Jalen Hurts beat him, and I think a lot of teams are going to continue with that philosophy, but he was able to use his legs a lot. The Cowboys didn't really have a spy on them, and I think that's probably a knock at them not having one of the best linebackers in the game in the DeMarvion Overshown, who is still hurt from his ACL and MCL injury. that he got last December against the Bengals, but when he's back, he'll be a huge difference maker for the Cowboys. But with that being said, though, they had linebackers in the game like Kenneth Murray, Jack Sanborn, only Maris Leafau for, I think, 6 snaps, which is crazy to say, but there was no spy against Jalen Hurts, and that paid dividends as Jalen Hurts had 14 carries for 62 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, and he was efficient in the passing game, not necessarily too many explosive plays except for the 51-yard reception that he had to Jahan Dotson. That was a great play, but Jalen Hurts completed 19 out of his 23 passing attempts for 152 passing yards, and the team was overall balanced. I mean, we know what the Eagles consist of offensively. Saquon Barkley didn't necessarily have the greatest game, 18 carries for 60 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown, only had 7 rushing yards. After halftime, the Cowboys really adjusted their game plan defensively on the D-line to stopping the run, and at first, the Cowboys, they were getting ran through in terms of a run perspective, but in the first half, like I said, those adjustments, and even with the lightning delay, they were able to stop the run at a high level, and that's what the Cowboys really used to justify that Micah Parsons trade, is that they need to stop the run, bringing in the Kenny Clark, which did help for sure in that game. When Kenny Clark was on the field, the Cowboys only allowed 2.8 rushing yards allowed per carry, and when he was off the field, the Cowboys allowed 6.6 rushing yards per carry, so that's a huge difference for sure. But with the Eagles, we saw their offense still be one of the best run units in the league. We all saw their offensive line on display being one of the best in the league with Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, who ended up leaving later in the game, so hopefully he's okay, but Cam Jurgens, just a whole 9, their offensive line. Really a main thing though that I think, I don't know if people should be concerned about, it's certainly something to pay attention to, is that the lack of production from Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown in this game. I mean, A.J. Brown only had 1 reception for 8 receiving yards. Devontae Smith had 3 receptions for 16 receiving yards, and I believe there was also some analytical stats saying that A.J. Brown had a 0.0 separation rate. I mean, that's absolutely putrid, so we'll see how things go. They play against the Chiefs in week 2 as well, and the Chiefs are going to be wanting to get a win after the performance they had against the Chargers. But yeah, for the Eagles though, it was a good hard-fought win for them. For the Cowboys, I'm impressed, like I said, and like I said, a lot of people have been saying how shocked they were that they were able to hang in there and almost beat the defending champions and stuff like that too. Like, dude, this team, like I said, if Dak is healthy, they are really good, and Dak looked clean. This is the game that you had to watch, because if you just look at the stats, you're probably like, oh man, these quarterbacks, I mean, they played all right. Dak threw for 188 passing yards. Jalen Hurts threw for 152 passing yards. If you watch this game, specifically now talking about Dak, he looked clean, comfortable, and he looked like he was moving different. He looked like that 2023 version of Dak. And also with the Cowboys offense with Brian Schottenheimer, it looks so different than what it was under Mike McCarthy. I mean, it was really night and day. Look at these type of stats right here. The Cowboys used motion on 42% of their plays against the Eagles in week 1. And last year, comparing it to last season, they ranked 29th league-wide in motion at the snap last year. 42%, which they used in week 1, would have ranked them the 4th highest in the NFL for last season. So I think that this offense is going to be very dynamic. You saw CeeDee Lamb. He really could have had a 200-yard receiving game if he didn't have a couple of those drops. And I think, there's a lot of things that go into losing a game. That Miles Sanders fumble was awful. He had a great run, but really I feel like that fumble really just nullified all that, and he got hawked down by Zach Bond as well too, so that didn't help his case. But overall, the Cowboys looked impressive from a running game perspective as well too. They were really balanced. Javonte Williams, he looked great. He was really physical and had 15 carries for 54 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, averaged 3.6 yards per carry, so maybe that's not the most, but he was impressive, and he showed a lot of not only juice, but like I said, physicality, toughness, and he was able to move some people out the way. And their offensive line, I think, is going to be one of the best units in the league. A very young offensive line now, but they've rebuilt it in the last 3 drafts, drafting, as we all know, in 2022, Tyler Smith, one of the best guards in the game. Last year in 2024, drafting Cooper Beebe in the 3rd round and Tyler Guyton in the 1st round, and this year drafting Tyler Booker out of Alabama in the 1st round too. So I think this Cowboys team is going to be really good this year. 10-7, 11-6 type of season. I wouldn't be surprised if they did even better. I know people will troll me on that, but people let their biases about the Cowboys, maybe trolling the franchise, stuff like that, things of that nature too, or their hatred, instead of actually looking at football. And from a coaching staff perspective, having Eberflus on as a defensive coordinator, new offensive coordinator Clayton Adams, who's with the Arizona Cardinals, as an O-line coach, who really made that offensive line and their offense in Arizona one of the best rushing teams in the game. I think that he's already from week 1 put on full display the type of different run block lanes in his type of offense, alongside combining that with Brian Schottenheimer as a play caller and head coach, and that philosophy is just going to help this Cowboys team be very complementary. And I like what I saw from both teams. The Eagles, they got the win. That's the most important thing. But the Cowboys as well too, even though there's no moral victories, you don't want to say, oh, it's a good loss or anything like that. Cowboys fans should be encouraged. I think this is going to be a way better season compared to last year, which was 7-10, which is very lackluster to say the least. This team is going to be better, and I believe that they're going to be one of the 7 teams in the playoffs for this 2025 NFL season. But a good first game to say for sure. And I'm not even going to talk about really that Jalen Carter situation, because that was classless. Everyone deserves forgiveness for sure, but like, why would you spit on a human being? I know Dak spit on the ground and stuff like that that too. Dude, he didn't spit on Jalen Carter. So yeah, I just briefly wanted to say something about that as well too, guys. So before anyone wants to say about, oh, the Cowboys, they wouldn't have been running the ball like that if Jalen Carter was in there. I'm not sure. We won't know. We'll see the second time they play against each other in week 12, but I do know that that was a terrible thing. But anyways, with that being said, that was a great first game, and let's move on to the next game. The next game that took place on Friday in Brazil between the Los Angeles Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs was another divisional matchup in the AFC West, and the Chargers won this game 27-21. Justin Herbert put on an absolute clinic, and I know it's the first game of the season, so I don't want to overreact too much to it, but we know what Justin Herbert is capable of, and now being with Jim Harbaugh in his second season as head coach with the Chargers, I think we're going to see a lot of performances like this, and Justin Herbert is going to really be trying to put on a tear. Last year, he had a great season, having 24 touchdowns and 3 interceptions only, but that playoff game against the Texans where he threw 4 interceptions, I think if anything, that fueled not only Justin Herbert, but the Chargers overall to really show that they're a physical football team and that they're no joke and that they're not pushover. And Justin Herbert showed that. He completed 25 out of his 34 passing attempts for 318 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Also had 7 carries for 32 rushing yards as well too, so was able to display his running ability. I feel like since Jim Harbaugh became the head coach last season, he really utilized Justin Herbert in his legs. I mean, Justin Herbert he's one of the tallest quarterbacks in the league at that 6'6" frame, and to use him in a running game, I think that's perfect because defenders aren't trying to tackle a guy at that size either, so that just helps him. We know how talented of a passer not only that he is from an accuracy standpoint, but just really his big arm ability to create explosive plays, and that showed with also Quentin Johnson having 5 receptions for 79 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. A lot of people have clowned him in the past about drops and stuff like that too, even though last year I think he played better than his rookie year, and that's perfect for them. Also, Ladd McConkey, who had an amazing rookie season, who had an amazing rookie season for the Chargers last year, has 6 receptions for 74 receiving yards, and then Keenan Allen, who's back here with the Chargers on the second stint, has 7 receptions for 68 receiving yards and a touchdown too. So the Chargers, they played great offensively, not only there, but defensively too. They started the game off 10-0 against the Chiefs and really just disrupted them overall. The Chiefs had a lot of pre-snap penalties, things of that nature too, which you saw Travis Kelce get frustrated with his linemen about. Patrick Mahomes, from a stat standpoint, it wasn't bad. I mean, on paper for sure. Completed 24 out of his 39 passing attempts for 258 passing yards and a touchdown. He also had a rushing touchdown and 6 carries for 57 rushing yards, so that was impressive to see Mahomes get out of the pocket and create plays with his legs, but that also shows that his receivers aren't great right now. We knew that, especially with Rashee Rice now missing 6 games. I guess after now this game, 5 more games before he can come back, but that hurts there. And then now Xavier Worthy dealing with a shoulder injury that he suffered in the game. That just doesn't help, and the Chiefs are going to have to really utilize that wide receiver by committee even more. And Travis Kelce, at the age of 35, turning 36 next month, is going to have to be more of a focal point and really bounce back from the season that he had last year, which was a regression of a season for sure. But Hollywood Brown, he played great, had 10 receptions for 99 receiving yards. Juju Smith-Schuster, he had 5 receptions for 55 receiving yards. And Kelce, he did have a receiving touchdown on 2 receptions for 47 receiving yards too, but it wasn't enough. And I know Justin Herbert now has only beat the Chiefs 3 times out of a possible 11 times that they've played overall, but that's a good win to propel them in the AFC West picture because it's going to be a tough division. You can make the argument that the AFC West is going to be the best division this year in the NFL, with the Broncos, who were a playoff team last year, and also the Chargers and the Chiefs obviously were playoff teams as well too, with the Chiefs making the Super Bowl last year, even though they got blasted. These teams are really going to be at each other's necks to try to win the division. And for the Chargers and Broncos perspective, they're going to want to be trying to win the division to stop the Chiefs from winning the AFC West for a 10th year in a row. So that'll be intriguing to see for sure. But I love this matchup between the Chargers and Chiefs, and also the Cowboys and the Eagles. That was 2 straight divisional matchups that we had, but also we had more on Sunday, and I'm excited to talk about those as well. Moving on to Sunday though, this game in particular, I don't think a lot of people saw it happening like this, as the Indianapolis Colts frankly dominated the Miami Dolphins, winning 33-8. Daniel freaking Jones, when a lot of people giving up on him, and a lot of people were perplexed that the Colts decided to start Jones over Anthony Richardson going into the 2025 season. Me being one of those, he proved a lot of people wrong for sure. In this game, Daniel Jones completed 22 out of his 29 passing attempts for 272 passing yards and a touchdown. He also led the Colts to 4 consecutive scoring drives in the first half. The last Colts quarterback to do that was Peyton Manning, of course. Just speaks to the type of game that he had, him really having command over the offense, being complimentary also in the running game with Jonathan Taylor, who had 18 carries for 71 rushing yards. Also playmakers that got involved for the Colts were Michael Pittman Jr. with 6 receptions for 80 receiving yards and a touchdown. Rookie tight end Tyler Warren, who I think is going to have a sensational season. He also added 7 receptions for 76 receiving yards. Just overall, it was a great game from the Colts offense and defensively. Daniel Jones in the running game also had 2 rushing touchdowns on 7 carries for 26 rushing yards as well too. So just a great game from their offense, but their defense, as I mentioned, played really well. Forced Tua Tagovailoa to 2 interceptions. Tagovailoa did not have a great game in the slightest bit. Had those 2 picks, completed 14 out of his 23 passing attempts, throwing for only 114 passing yards and just 1 touchdown. That Colts defense made him look very pedestrian. Cameron Bynum, newly acquired safety for the Colts, had an interception, and also Latu had an interception as well too for that defense. So they were just really able to get to the quarterback at a high level. And look out, AFC South. They could be potentially looking to be a fixture in the AFC South, as they were really the past couple of years. If they didn't lose that game in the 2023-24 season in week 18, they would have won the division that year. Last year they were 8-9, so they've been a team that's been knocking on the door. And I'll be real, I didn't expect much from this team. I probably would have expected the Dolphins to win this game. And let's also be mindful that this is week 1 as well too. This is a 17-game season. A lot has to go on, but the Colts, they had a great first impression. But for the Dolphins, there's a lot of frustration. Tyreek Hill mad on the sideline. He only had 4 receptions for 40 receiving yards. Jalen Waddle only had 4 receptions for 30 receiving yards. Their playmakers weren't really involved at a high level. Really, Devon Achane was the only bright spot, as he averaged 7.9 yards per carry, having 7 carries for 55 rushing yards. But overall, the team just looked very pedestrian, and there's a lot of pressure on the Dolphins to perform. Overall, from a coaching staff standpoint, I think that if they don't make the playoffs, there's a good chance that Mike McDaniel might not be the coach in 2026. So a lot of pressure there, but shout out to the Colts and Shane Steichen, their head coach, getting a great and dominant win, winning 33-8 over the Miami Dolphins to move to 1-0 on the season. Now, this matchup between the Steelers and the Jets, you can make the argument that this was the game of week 1 after the Bills and Ravens. And I wouldn't refute that too much, because the Steelers and Jets, they were going right back at it. Both of these quarterbacks, for the Steelers having Aaron Rodgers and the Jets having Justin Fields, essentially switching quarterbacks from last season's Jets having Rodgers and the Steelers having Fields. It was a great type of revenge type of atmosphere for both of these quarterbacks to try to get a dub over the team that essentially gave up on them. And Rodgers was able to not only play well offensively, but the Steelers, they made key plays, including a Jalen Ramsey big hit over Garrett Wilson on that 4th down to end the game against the Jets. And just overall offensively and on special teams as well too. But the Steelers creating a turnover on Gibson to create an extra possession for the Steelers to score a touchdown later. It was a great game for the Steelers to really set the tone for the 2025 season, where a lot of people predict them to be a 10-7 or 9-18, the typical Steeler way that we've been accustomed to over the really past half decade plus, losing in the wild card round. Aaron Rodgers, he had a really good debut for the Steelers, completing 22 out of his 30 passing attempts for 244 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. Also, to add to that, DK Metcalf had 4 receptions for 83 receiving yards, averaging essentially 21 yards per reception. Calvin Austin also had 4 receptions for 70 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. And then Jalen Warren, Jonnu Smith, and Ben Skonorek, all 3 of them had receiving touchdowns as well too. So I like what I saw from the Steelers offense with Aaron Rodgers. Their offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, is getting things going off rip in their defense too. At first, they kind of struggled to contain Justin Fields, who was impressive in his showing. He completed 16 out of his 22 passing attempts for 218 passing yards and a touchdown. Also had 2 rushing touchdowns on 12 carries for 48 rushing yards. And Breece Hall had a really good game, adding 19 carries for 107 rushing yards too. And Brandon Allen also had a rushing touchdown. I like what I saw from the Jets and from the Steelers respectively. Garrett Wilson also had 7 receptions for 95 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. If Garrett Wilson held onto possession from that ball after that Jalen Ramsey hit, who knows, they could have been in position to potentially win the game on a game-winning field goal, but it didn't happen. And the Steelers were able to get the win in this quote-unquote revenge type of atmosphere, type of game at MetLife Stadium. It really sets the tone for their season. And for the Jets, though, I think that if anything, even though they lost the game, it sets a message that this team isn't going to be a team that you can run over. They're going to be a physical type of football team. They might not be the most talented, but they have a lot of playmakers on defense, offensively, and just overall, they have a solid football team with a lot of playmakers. Quentin Williams defensively. Sauce Gardner we know as well too. Quincy Williams had a sack in this game. Quentin Williams had a sack, and also Will McDonald had 2 sacks in this game. So to create 4 sacks on the Steelers offensive line, that was impressive. Their offense put them in positions to win, but it was a turnover battle, and the Jets had that crucial turnover in the 4th that really helped propel the Steelers to get that extra possession to win the game. So I'm impressed with what I saw from both teams in this game, and like I said, it was arguably the best matchup that we saw from week 1, but there were a lot of other good ones as well too. Ironically, this was the second game in NFL week 1 to have a lightning delay in a matchup between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Carolina Panthers, and Jacksonville really dominated in this game, winning 26-10. Had a great finishing turnover of an interception that Jordan Lewis had after a tip ball that Rico Dowdle dropped from Bryce Young in the 4th quarter. The Jaguars, I really love what I saw under the debut of Liam Cohen as the Jaguars head coach. Their offense was amazing, not only from a balance standpoint, but in the running game, particularly Travis Etienne Jr., where there's been a lot of trade rumors on him. Travis Etienne said, nah, we're not going out like that. And he had a dynamic game, averaging basically 9 yards per carry on 16 carries for 143 rushing yards, no touchdowns, but that sets the tone in terms of him potentially having a bounce back season, but also having a career season. And in the passing game, Trevor Lawrence, yes, he threw an interception, but he was still efficient, completing 19 out of his 31 passing attempts for 178 passing yards and a touchdown that he threw to Brian Thomas Jr. Jr. He only had 1 reception for 9 yards, but still, that touchdown, I mean, it helped him for sure. And Hunter Long also had a receiving touchdown. And then defensively, like I mentioned, they forced Bryce Young to have 2 interceptions, one from Boyesade Olokun. I know I said his name wrong, don't roast me. And then also, like I mentioned, Jordan Lewis getting that other pick. So I love what I saw from the Jaguars. From the Panthers, there was a lot to be desired, but we already knew, even going into the 2024 season for the Jaguars, we knew the type of components that they had defensively, and they really added to that from a free agent and draft perspective. They're trying to, like I mentioned with the Colts, they're trying to take reins from the Texans in the AFC South, who lost against the Rams, and we'll talk about them later, but I still think the Texans should be favored to win a division. I mean, it's week 1, guys. Let's relax. Like I said in the intro, there's a lot of overreaction that can happen for week 1, but the Jaguars, they played a dominant game, and they took care of business, because really, going into this game, you could have made the case that this is a pick'em game. You don't know who would win the game, especially how the Panthers finished off with Bryce Young having a promising second half after reclaiming a starting quarterback job at the mid part of the 2024 season. But it wasn't a great game for him in this one, completing 18 out of 35 passing attempts, going for 154 passing yards, 1 touchdown, those 2 picks I talked about. Yeah, it wasn't great from their offense, I'm not gonna lie. And we'll see how things go for the Panthers, because they need to at least be a team. I think they can win 7 games at least and be improved from that 5-12 record they had last season, but they're gonna need to do it ASAP. But I like what I saw from the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they're trying to get back to the playoffs for the first time since the 2022 season, where that was a great year for Trevor Lawrence individually as well. And I think that as long as he can stay healthy, they have the chance and opportunity to do so, whether it's a wild card or winning the AFC South. And we saw Travis Hunter play, as we know, being utilized in moments at the cornerback position, but also primarily being a wide receiver. I'm really intrigued to see how his rookie season goes, because what he's doing is certainly unprecedented. But like I said, it was a great win for Jacksonville. For this Cardinals and Saints game, I'm not gonna lie, I thought the Cardinals would win more convincingly, but nevertheless, they won the game, winning 20-13. Kyler Murray completing 21 out of his 29 passing attempts, throwing for 163 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. I like what I saw from their offense. Trey Benson had 8 carries for 69 rushing yards, and James Conner, he had 12 carries for 39 rushing yards, averaging only 3.2 yards per carry, but Benson averaged 8.6. Kyler Murray had said in the offseason that he could see this being a breakout year for Trey Benson, and that really just continues along with that theme of that potentially happening. And I like what I saw in the connection with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyler Murray in this game. That's been a real question mark in the strong suit after, you know, maybe things not going the way that they envisioned Marvin Harrison Jr. having in his rookie year, even though I still think that he had a solid rookie season. Maybe he didn't have 1,200, 1,300, 1,400 receiving yards, but I think that he is going to really just improve this year. And he had 5 receptions for 71 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown in this game, so I like that. James Conner also had a receiving touchdown too as well. And then on the defensive side, which I've talked about even in the Cardinals season preview that I did for my entire season preview series, like I mentioned before, on every single team, I think that they have the chance to be one of the best defenses in the league, and they sacked Spencer Rattler. Fortunately for Spencer Rattler, though, he didn't have any interceptions or anything like that too, and he did throw the ball a lot. Kellen Moore had Spencer Rattler throw the ball 46 times, and he completed 27 of those pass attempts for 214 passing yards. Not a bad game, but overall not enough for the offense to push the needle and defeat the Arizona Cardinals. Alvin Kamara, he had 11 carries for 45 rushing yards and a touchdown. Really the lone touchdown of the game for the Saints. So a really hard-fought game on both sides. I was impressed from the Saints in terms of them hanging in there and making it a close and competitive game, but the better team won in the Arizona Cardinals, and I'm intrigued to see how they do in the NFC West this year, because they were 8-9 last year. They swept the 49ers last year, who got a win over the Seahawks in week 1 this year, but I'm intrigued to see how the Cardinals will face off in the NFC to potentially be a wild card and maybe have a chance for sure to win the division this year. In this game, I'm not surprised about the outcome at all. The Washington Commanders beating the New York Giants, winning 21-6. I'm just kind of chuckled at the fact that, and of course, like I said, it's week 1, so there's still a lot more games to play, a lot more football to be played. But a lot of people said this is an upset alert game for the Giants over the Commanders, stuff like that too. And it was just funny because to see how stagnant the Giants offense was, it just made that take look crazy. I'm not gonna lie. So it was just funny seeing that, in my opinion. I mean, look at the stat line for Russell Wilson. The offense was just not able to get things going, only completing 17 out of his 37 passing attempts, which is 45%. That's not beautiful at all, guys, not efficient at all. And you saw a visibly frustrated Malik Neighbors on the sideline too. He had 5 receptions for 71 receiving yards, but as their wide receiver 1, you know he wants to get the ball, and he's in his 2nd season, so he's still a young player at the age of 22. So he's gonna have to, you know, continue to understand that defenses are targeting him literally. And the thing about it is too, though, that is crazy, and I'm sure that Giants fans are frustrated about that. Russell Wilson did target Wan'Dale Robinson more, who had 6 receptions for 55 receiving yards. So I don't know with the Giants. Their defense is certainly potent. They have a really, on paper, a great front four with Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, rookie Abdul Carter, and Dexter Lawrence on the defensive line. But when you're constantly putting your defensive line out there and you're not creating anything on offense, you're gonna break down being on the field so much. So, and especially in this matchup with the Washington Commanders, who run a lot of tempo. We know they had the 5th best offense in the league last season under Jaden Daniels, who had a solid game in this game, completing 19 out of his 30 passing attempts for 233 passing yards and a touchdown, and he had 11 11 carries for 68 rushing yards on the ground. Then their rookie running back, who they essentially chose over Brian Robinson, who they traded to the 49ers, Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt, he had 10 carries in this game for 82 rushing yards and a touchdown. Really efficient, really toted the rock at a high level, averaging 8.2 yards per carry. Deebo Samuel also had a 19-yard rushing touchdown as well too, adding to that, and he had 7 receptions for 77 receiving yards too. So all that conversation about Deebo looking, washed and stuff like that too, and I'm not gonna lie, I laughed at some of this stuff because it did look kind of crazy, but he proved that he still has some great bursts, and he's gonna be a great Swiss Army knife for this offense to be utilized in Washington as his first season as commander. And then Zach Ertz, he also had a receiver touchdown too as well. So Terry McLaurin didn't necessarily get utilized the most in this game, only had 2 receptions for 27 receiving yards too, but the Commanders, they'll take the win over this against one of their divisional rivals in the Giants, who they've beaten. Even though last year they had a couple of close matchups, this one wasn't particularly close. It was in the first half, but in the second half, the Commanders were able to break away a little bit, and it was a good 15-point win. The Giants, they have talent on both sides of the football, but for them, I think the biggest question is when are they going to end up starting Jackson Dart at one point of the season. I wonder if you're a Giants fan, let me know in the comments below when you want Jackson Dart to start. So yeah, but it's a good win for the Washington Commanders. Both times that the Bucs and the Falcons played last year, the Falcons won and swept the Bucs, although the Bucs still ended up winning the division because they won key games, and the Falcons really slipped at the opportunity to win the division. And in this game, the Bucs were able to set the tone, saying that this NFC South is still our division, and they won the game in a close match, winning 23-20, moving on to a 1-0 record. Now, I like what I saw from a Baker Mayfield. Even though at times the offense was a little stagnant, he was still able to persevere over that and connect with players like their rookie Emeka Egbuka and Bucky Irving for receiving touchdowns, and I'll talk about their stat line in a few. But Baker Mayfield, even though he didn't have the most passing yards, only having 167 passing yards, he still threw those 3 touchdowns that I mentioned, completing 17 out of his 32 passing attempts, and he also had 5 carries for 39 rushing yards too. So I think one thing about Baker Mayfield's game that is so underrated still, I know that he's not the most athletic quarterback, but he's able to get out the pocket for sure and create on the run, whether it's from a passing standpoint or able to scramble at times too, and he showed that. And Bucky Irving, he didn't necessarily have the best yards in a rushing game standpoint, having 14 carries for 37 rushing yards, only averaging 2.6 yards per carry. And another thing to note too, Rachaad White only had 2 rushing attempts for 14 rushing yards too. So I think that further confirms that this backfield is Bucky Irving's. But Bucky Irving, even though not having the greatest rushing stats, he did have that receiving touchdown that I talked about. And then Emeka Egbuka, the rookie who they selected in the first round of this year's draft with the 19th pick, he had 4 receptions for 67 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. I think that he is a future of this franchise at the wide receiver position, and it's perfect because he's learning under Mike Evans, who's going to be a future Hall of Famer. He's had a 1,000 receiving yard season in all of his 11 years as he's been in the league, so that's someone perfect to learn from. And Evans himself, he added 5 receptions for 51 receiving yards. And let's remember, guys, this offense doesn't have Chris Godwin or a Jalen McMillan, who suffered a neck injury. Having those 2 guys back added to this offense, it's just going to further more into them being one of the best offenses in the league, and I talked about that in my season preview series that I made. So just stay tuned for this offense. I really like what I saw. They have some great playmakers. They also have solid tight ends too with the Cade Otton, Ryan Miller, even a receiver to an extent in Sterling Shepard. He had 3 receptions for 39 receiving yards too. So the Buccaneers, even though it wasn't the most conventional, they didn't put the most points up, they were able to make key plays to beat the Falcons, and Michael Penix Jr., I will say he had a really good game, but they got past happy as Michael Penix threw the ball 42 times. He completed 27 of those completions though, so that was a solid thing for sure. Throwing for 298 passing yards and a passing touchdown, and then Bijan Robinson had a 50-yard receiving touchdown in the game. He had 6 receptions for 100 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown too, as we know that he's one of the best backs in football. He didn't necessarily have the most rushing yards in this game, having 24 rushing yards, but in the receiving game he was dynamic. And Kyle Pitts had 7 receptions for 59 receiving yards. Drake London had 8 receptions for 55 receiving yards. And Ray McCloud had 3 receptions for 51 receiving yards as well too in himself. But they weren't able to get the ball in the end zone on key plays, which really could have pushed them to winning this game. The Buccaneers were able to do so, and that was the biggest difference in this game too, alongside with Hassan Reddick having a sack too on the defensive side, and the Bucs making key defensive plays under Todd Bowles, who was a defensive-minded head coach. They were able to out-execute the Falcons in this game, and I think that you can make the case that their next matchup, it'll end up being a split or something like that too. But as I've continued to say, right now, the safe pick for the NFC South will still continue to be the Buccaneers, and if that's the case, that'll be the 5th consecutive season that the Bucs win the NFC South. But this was a good matchup between them and the Falcons in Week 1. For a second, I was about to be like, are the Bengals on upset alert again in Week 1? But they were able to win this game against the Cleveland Browns, winning 17-16, moving on to a 1-0 record. But I'm not gonna lie, the Browns look pretty solid, and even though Joe Flacco threw 2 interceptions, he was still efficient, completing 31 out of his 45 passing attempts for 290 passing yards and a touchdown. And for me, what didn't make sense for me after the Bengals, they made an emphasis to play their players in the preseason and playing Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, players of that nature to start off hot. The offense was the opposite of that for sure. Joe Burrow only completed 14 out of his 23 passing attempts, throwing for a pedestrian 113 passing yards and only 1 touchdown. Not to mention the Browns sacked Burrow 3 times, including Myles Garrett, who sacked Burrow 2 times. Continuing the trend of the Bengals having a suspect offensive line, that's not a great thing too, but really, for me, the not great thing for the Bengals is that, yes, you won the game, but you still didn't look great. I mean, look at your playmaker stats. T. Higgins only had 3 receptions for 33 receiving yards. Jamar Chase only had 2 receptions for 26 receiving yards. That's looked to be the best wide receiver duo in the league. And I know there's a lot of extra attention and things of that nature too on them. And Noah Fant was the one who scored the lone receiving touchdown for the Bengals alongside with a Chase Brown who had their rushing touchdown. But overall, their offense, it did not look great. I mean, talk about Chase Brown real quick. They fed him the football. He had 21 carries, but only for 43 rushing yards, averaging 2 yards per carry. I mean, that's pretty ridiculous to say the least, but that just shows that the Browns, you know, even though last season was pretty bad for them, the season before they were 11-6, and they proved to still possess one of the top defenses in the league, and they showed that and displayed that at a high level. It just came down to certain things on their offense not being able to get things going, which I predicted. I know Joe Flacco, he's still a solid bridge quarterback, but you're going to need an answer to really push the needle. And at some point, like I continue to talk about with the Browns, they need to see what they have in a Shedeur Sanders or potentially Dylan Gabriel. Because I know they recently signed Quinshon Judkins finally to his rookie deal after that off-the-field stuff happened. He didn't play in this game. Dylan Sampson, who looks to be their back right now, had 12 carries for 29 rushing yards, so they weren't really able to utilize anything there. Jerry Jeudy, who had a career year in 2024 for the Browns, he had 5 receptions for 66 receiving yards in this game. And Sampson, he did have a good receiving game, having 8 receptions for 64 receiving yards. And Cedric Tillman had their lone receiving touchdown. I'm interested to see how their offense goes forward because the Browns showed in this game that they can keep their team in it. But how much will the offense be stagnant, or will they be able to break through to make the Browns a respectable team? That's the takeaway for the Browns' perspective. But for the Bengals, you got to start off hotter, man. And you have an opportunity to beat the Jaguars in week 2. But like I mentioned, their defense was pretty dominant against the Panthers, and they have some key players on their defense. So the Bengals, you don't want to slide. You don't want to be too stagnant because you're going to be playing some teams soon. In week 3, for example, the Vikings, week 4 against the Broncos, where you're going to have to come with it or you're going to find yourself behind and lose a game. So yeah, but the Bengals were able to win this game, and the Browns, they put on a respectable defensive performance for sure. I think in this game, or at least going into it, a lot of people favored the New England Patriots to win, but the Raiders were able to grab a win in Foxborough on the road, beating the Patriots 20-13, and there's a lot that went into that. First of all, the Raiders defense put on an absolute clinic defensively. They sacked Drake May 4 times, forced him to an interception, and a precedent of that as well too was that they had Drake May drop back 46 times, something that I wasn't expecting at all to happen in terms of them bringing back a Josh McDaniels, Mike Vrabel being the head coach there in New England. Having them throw the ball nearly 50 times in week 1, I don't think that's a recipe for success, but it's a testament to how the Raiders were able to put pressure on the Patriots to try to play catch-up football and really play out of their element. And from an offensive perspective, I like how Geno Smith played in this game. He threw a pick, yes, but Geno Smith, he was very efficient. He completed 24 out of his 34 passing attempts, throwing for 362 passing yards, a touchdown, and that interception that I mentioned. Ashton Jeanty, he didn't necessarily have the best game from a running perspective, but he did score a rushing touchdown, but only averaged 2 yards per carry. It'll only get better. The Raiders' offensive line isn't necessarily the best, but they performed enough to help them get this win, and I think that the Raiders' defense was a huge launching point of that. And it's not the same old Raiders, guys. This AFC West is going to be a gauntlet. We saw the Chiefs lose against the Chargers. The Chargers got a great win over the Chiefs. We'll talk about the Broncos in a few, but I'm encouraged from what I saw from the Raiders. They'll be a competitive team, and I think that I wouldn't be surprised at all if they are a team that wins close to 8 games because they're going to be in it because of Pete Carroll. He's one of the best head coaches in the league. Won a Super Bowl, won a championship with USC when he was a collegiate head coach, and I think he's helping to really redefine the Raiders because it's been a lackluster, really half decade for this franchise that hasn't been to the Super Bowl since the 2002 season. I think that Carroll, if not anything else, he's going to help this team be more of a tough football team. And they have some weapons with Max Crosby being one of the best defensive ends and pass rushers in the league. And we saw that on display against the Patriots. And I'm encouraged what I saw from them. So it's a good win for the Raiders, but also the Patriots. They should still be encouraged. But I think they have to be more complimentary and not have Drake May throw the ball almost 50 times in a game. This next game was a divisional matchup between the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks. And the 49ers won 17-13. A really great game on both sides defensively. The Seahawks, they were a 10-7 team last year, but missed the playoffs due to a tiebreaker with the Rams. And I think that this division is sneakily going to be one of the best in the league, just in terms of, I wouldn't be surprised if the Niners, the Seahawks, the Rams, or the Cardinals had enough to win the division. But in this game, Brock Purdy, he was a little up and down, but he made plays when he needed to, and he completed 26 out of his 35 passing attempts, throwing for 277 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, but those 2 interceptions that I mentioned. Also, George Kittle exited the game after suffering a hamstring injury in the first half, and now he's going to be out 3 to 5 weeks due to that injury, which sucks because they want to have him back in the lineup because right now he is their best and most reliable pass catcher with Brandon Ayuk being out. But I do like what I saw from Ricky Pearsall, who had 4 receptions for 108 receiving yards, averaging 27 yards per reception. Christian McCaffrey was back in this game, and there were some rumors that kind of scared a lot of people, probably showing flashbacks to last year about his calf, but he ended up playing solid, at least from the receiving standpoint, having 9 receptions for 73 receiving yards, and in the running game, he has 69 rushing yards on 22 carries. Brian Robinson Jr. also added 33 rushing yards too. In their defense, they were able to play solidly as well. Didn't allow any touchdowns from Sam Darnold, at least in the passing game. Only touchdown that the Seahawks had was from Zach Charbonnet on a rushing touchdown where he had 12 carries for 47 rushing yards in the game. Jackson Smith-Njigba, though, he did act a fool, though. He had 9 receptions for 124 receiving yards. He was really emerging as their wide receiver 1 there. Cooper Kupp really didn't get anything going, only had 2 receptions for 15 receiving yards, but I like how the 49ers played. They're trying to really rebound from a season that was lackluster, to say the least, last year, with the injuries that they suffered and just overall the adversity that they were dealt, and they had to really rebuild this team from a draft perspective, building out their defensive line, having to let go of some pieces in free agency, things of that nature too. But the 49ers, they had a really good game. I think both of these teams, like I mentioned with the Seahawks as well, and then the Rams and the Cardinals, they have enough to be not only competitive in the NFC, but to make a playoff run and win the NFC West. So I'm really intrigued how this division goes, but I like this game between the 49ers and the Seahawks, and the 49ers, they were able to get the dub. An absolute defensive battle between the Denver Broncos and the Titans. And the Broncos, they were able to win 20-12, but I think it's reasonable to say that the Broncos offense certainly disappointed in this matchup. Bo Nix, he completed 25 out of his 40 passing attempts, only throwing for 176 passing yards, 1 touchdown and 2 picks. The conversation about Bo Nix is he did have a solid rookie year last year. When you look at the tape and watch the game from an eye test perspective, it was a lot of check down Charlie type of scenarios. They were conservative at times too. They're gonna have to push the football down at some point, and I know the Titans, they low-key have one of the better defenses in the league. I know they weren't great last year. They had the first pick, which resulted in them drafting Cam Ward. But the Broncos, a lot of people have them breaking the Chiefs streak in terms of winning the AFC West. They got to show it. In fact, at this point, at least after week 1, and like I said, we don't want to overreact to everything, but you would say that the Chargers, if anything, have the better opportunity, especially how they looked against the Chiefs, to win the AFC West. So we'll see. But the Broncos defense, they did play well. Cam Ward only completed 12 out of his 28 passing attempts for 112 passing yards. I mean, that defense is on absolute lock. Against a rookie in his first game, made things difficult. And I think that the Broncos, they have a case to have the best defense in the league this year, as long as their playmakers stay healthy, things to that nature too. We saw rookies like Ajay Barron make plays. They have a great secondary, having Pat Surtain, who won Defensive Player of the Year. Nick Benito had a stack. Justin Stannard had a stack as well too, alongside of Jonan Ellis, Jonathan Cooper. I mean, the Broncos literally had 6 sacks in this game against the Titans. So if that's not the definition of dominant against the Titans O-line, I don't know what is. So yeah, they put on a defensive clinic, but against these better teams that they'll face, not only in the division with the AFC West and the Chiefs and the Chargers, but in the AFC overall and throughout their schedule, they're going to have to play better offensively, because Bo Nix, 176 passing yards, 1 touchdown and 2 picks, is not going to cut it. But they were able to slide against the Titans, but they're going to have to play better overall as a collective. But that's a good week 1 win for them. I mentioned it a little bit in the intro, but I'm thoroughly impressed from what I saw from the Green Bay Packers against the Detroit Lions. Winning this game 27-13 in dominant fashion. At one point, the Packers were up 24-6. Their performance against the Lions in this game was the definition of complimentary football. Micah Parsons, he had his impact felt instantly in the game, having a sack on Jared Goff, hawking him down, having 3 pressures that made a difference, really dominating Penei Sewell on a rep 2, one of the better right tackles in the league. I think if the Packers defense continues to play at this level, and that was also, mind you, with Micah Parsons only playing like 50% of the snaps, it's going to get scary. And I talked about it for a while, at least going into the offseason. I kind of predicted that the Packers would win a division. The coordinator loss for the Lions, at least from an offense perspective for sure, we saw the Lions offense look archaic. And like I continue to say, we don't want to overreact to week 1, because teams will get better and adjust, but they're going to have to get better, because if you look at what the Lions did offensively, David Montgomery had 11 carries for 25 rushing yards. Jahmyr Gibbs had 9 carries for 19 rushing yards. And then from a receiving perspective as well too, Jahmyr Gibbs, he's a player that had a dominant receiving year last year. He only had 10 carries receiving yards. Their best pass catcher was Sam Laporta, one of the better tight ends in the league, had 6 receptions for 79 receiving yards, but Amon-Ra St. Brown only had 45 receiving yards. I mean, this Green Bay Packers team put on an absolute defensive clinic, and I wonder if that's a sign of things to come for this team, who is certainly in a win now scenario with one of the younger teams in the league, but one of the best rosters as well too, with a dominant offensive line. You look at their stats too. I love what Jordan Love did in this game. He had a couple of interceptions that were fortunately called back, which is a good thing. He completed 16 out of his 22 passing attempts for 188 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. They were balanced also offensively with Josh Jacobs, who had 19 carries for 66 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. And Jaden Reed had a receiving touchdown. Romeo Doubs also had a couple of explosive plays, having 2 receptions for 68 receiving yards. This team looked nice. Tucker Kraft had a receiving touchdown too. I'm really intrigued by this Green Bay Packers team and how dominant this team could be, because I wouldn't be surprised if they win the NFC North. I'm still not too down on the Lions yet though, because it's week 1. It takes time for these new offenses under new regimes to really transpire and move forward. But if what we saw from the Lions is the things to come, because it's going to be a tough game in week 2 against the Baltimore Ravens, who are going to be rejuvenating, trying to get a win after losing how they did to the Bills. If they get dominated in that game, it's going to be time to be scratching our heads about the Detroit Lions for sure, after the dominant season that they had last year and the uplifting and uprising season that they had in 2023. But I think that this NFC North, it's one of the best divisions also in football. And Green Bay, they're showing their behinds right now, trying to open up a Super Bowl window. And everyone, I've seen this stat saying that Brett Favre, he won a Super Bowl in his 6th season. Aaron Rodgers won a Super Bowl in his 6th season. And now it's Jordan Love's 6th season. Will that happen for the Packers this year? And Jordan Love, only time will tell. But this was definitely a dominant and solidifying win against the Detroit Lions in week 1. Talk about another team that kind of looked pedestrian on offense. The Houston Texans, as they lost against the Los Angeles Rams, where the Rams won 14-9 in LA at SoFi. The Texans had 11 offensive penalties for 80 yards, had a couple of offensive linemen deal with injuries throughout the game. Rookie offensive tackle Ariante Ersary that they drafted in the 2nd round had to constantly move between left tackle and right tackle, left tackle and right tackle. That's not the definition of stability at all. If anything, it's this definition of concern and worry for the Texans, who already had one of the worst offensive lines last year. CJ Stroud was the 2nd most sacked quarterback in the 2024 season, and against the Rams, he was sacked 3 times, which resulted in their offense really not being able to create anything at all. They didn't score any touchdowns, only those 3 field goals from Fairbairn. CJ Stroud completed 19 out of his 27 passing attempts for 188 passing yards. They were really on lock, and the Rams, they were able to really play great on both sides of the football. Offensively, Matthew Stafford had a solid game after all of those back concerns, things of that nature. He completed 21 out of his 29 passing attempts, throwing for 245 passing yards and a touchdown. And then Kyron Williams had a rushing touchdown. Puka Nacua really dominated against this Texans secondary, who was one of the best last year, but Nacua had 10 receptions for 130 receiving yards, and Davis Allen had their lone receiving touchdown. I like what I saw from the Rams against a team who both of these teams, respectively in their conferences, made the divisional round. For the Rams, they were close to making it to the NFC Championship game, and the Texans, they lost against the Chiefs in their divisional game. But the Rams, they put on a statement and said that they can win in any which way. They can win in an ugly way. We know that we're accustomed to Sean McVay having one of the best offenses in the league, but their defense has really been a key fixture for the Rams. After last year, after losing Aaron Donald to retirement in 2023, they've shown that that's another element that's going to help this team really compete in the NFC and be a great team overall. For the Texans, though, they have to get things right with their offense, because I think they have a great defense to get things done. You can make the argument they have close to a Super Bowl level type of defense with Will Anderson Jr., Daniil Hunter, Derek Stingley, Amari Lassiter, a lot of players like that. Also, remember on the defensive line, Denico Autry is out for the first 4 games, but they have to get things right from an offensive perspective, because if they can't do that, this team is going to continue to be a team that won't have enough and will continue to be a team that's not on a level of teams like the Chiefs, the Bills, or the Ravens. But it's a great win for the Rams in this week 1 game. Talk about teams who are not only in the upper echelon of the AFC, but in the NFL overall. A great Sunday night football matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills. I know it's week 1, but you can make the argument that going into the rest of the year, this could be the game of the year. And the Buffalo Bills won this 41-40 after the Ravens were up 40-25 with 4 minutes left. Derrick Henry put on an absolute running clinic, but had a crucial fumble in the 4th quarter, which really helped propel the Bills to create extra possessions and ultimately win the game. But from a stat perspective, let's talk about the Bills first before we get into the Ravens, because the Bills did win the game. Josh Allen was hooping in this game, completed 33 out of his 46 passing attempts, throwing for 394 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Also had 30 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Then James Cook had a rushing touchdown, but also in the receiving game, James Cook had 58 receiving yards for 5 receptions. And Keon Coleman, 2nd-year wide receiver, showed a great step in terms of him potentially being the wide receiver 1 for the future of this Buffalo Bills team. Had 8 receptions for 112 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. And Khalil Shakir had 6 receptions for 64 receiving yards. I just like what the Bills were able to do. They did throw the first punch in the game, scoring a touchdown in their opening drive, but the Ravens, they were able to score, which made things tough for the Bills. And the Bills, they had struggle stopping Derrick Henry, who went off having 123 rushing yards in the first half, and overall in the game having nearly 170 rushing yards, as he had 18 carries for 169 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, averaging 9.4 yards per carry. But that fumble really made a huge difference. Lamar Jackson, he had a good game too as well, completing 14 out of his 19 passing attempts Mahomes for 209 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, and had 70 yards in a rushing game on 6 carries and a rushing touchdown, but it didn't end up being enough. Also, Zay Flowers had 7 receptions for 143 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown, and DeAndre Hopkins had that amazing one-handed catch receiving touchdown too. But from a standpoint of looking at the game and analyzing why the Ravens lost, it's execution. It's simple as that, and it's a turnover battle. I know the Ravens, they played a clean game, but Derrick Henry having that fumble, that really made a huge difference. You can't have those type of mistakes and turnovers against teams like the Bills or the Chiefs, especially in the playoff scenario, because that's been the biggest difference for the teams like the Baltimore Ravens making the Super Bowl or being a team that wins the Super Bowl or getting to the Super Bowl, because they've made some shooting in the foot type of moves to prevent themselves from getting to that level. But for the Buffalo Bills, they were able to win this game. Also, a stat that's pretty interesting as well, the Ravens are 1-5 since 2022 against the Bills and the Chiefs. And another stat that was broken in this game is that with the Ravens and Derrick Henry, when he had 100 rushing yards in the game, they were 10-0, and now they're 10-1 after this matchup against the Bills as they lost. So it was a great matchup and a great game, but the Ravens, they're gonna have to, make sure that they get a lot of great wins this year, because this could have went a long way in terms of later in the season potentially having a case for the 1 seed. And it's still early, like I continue to say, so you never know what will happen. The season is long and unpredictable, but this is one that you want to make a statement in. And another conversation too that I'm not going to go in too depth with right now, but we'll see how it monitors throughout later weeks, is that Ravens defense, because they have all the names, they have all the personnel to do enough, but they allowed 41 points against the Bills and weren't able to execute, weren't able to stop them in the fourth quarter. So that's a conversation to be had there. But it's an impressive, a great win for the Buffalo Bills, a great matchup between the previous 2 MVPs last year, Lamar Jackson finishing second in MVP, but was first team All-Pro, but Josh Allen won the MVP. And the year before, Lamar Jackson winning the 2023 MVP. It was a great matchup and a great sign of things to come from these teams, who I fully expect to make deep runs respectively in the AFC. For this final game on Monday Night Football between the Minnesota Vikings and the Chicago Bears, being the 8th divisional matchup in week 1, it was really a tale of 2 halves, as the Bears were leading the Vikings 17-6 at halftime, but in the second half, the Vikings were really rejuvenated, and JJ McCarthy was able to respond even after throwing a pick 6 in the third quarter. JJ McCarthy ultimately ended up having a great game, throwing for 2 passing touchdowns and having a solidifying rushing touchdown in that game, completed 13 out of his 20 passing attempts, 143 passing yards, and 25 rushing yards on the ground. When that pick 6 happened, and even before that in the first half, a lot of people were talking about, man, JJ McCarthy looks so mid. And that's why I tell people, especially in this video, I've continued to emphasize it a lot. It is early, guys. There's not a referendum on all of these teams after 1 game or after 1 half. You have to continue to watch them develop. And also on the flip side, with a Caleb Williams, he looked efficient in the pocket, things of that nature too in the first half. There was a stretch where he completed 10 out of his 11 passing attempts for the Bears. And, Ben Johnson, he put an emphasis on Caleb Williams having completions, and completions. And we saw that in the first half, but the second half, the offense stalled. The Bears defense really played a good game, but overall, they had to continue getting back on the field in the second half, and that ended up wearing them out. And the Vikings were able to persevere under a great coaching masterclass from Kevin O'Connell, and JJ McCarthy continued to show why he has the potential to be the franchise quarterback of this team. Also in the running game, they were balanced too. Jordan Mason had 68 rushing yards on 15 carries, averaging 4.5 yards per carry. Justin Jefferson had a receiving touchdown. Aaron Jones also had a receiving touchdown as well too, and both of them equally had 44 receiving yards. I just love this game for sure. An NFC North matchup with 2 teams that I think are going to be certainly in the mix in terms of the Vikings in the playoff picture, and I think the Bears, they'll be improved under this new regime under Ben Johnson. And let's just remember, guys, Kevin O'Connell, he's been with JJ McCarthy for 16 months now since the draft last year. I know JJ McCarthy, he tore his meniscus last year and wasn't able to play, but he's continued to learn in this system. Caleb Williams has only been with Ben Johnson for 6 months now. He's continuing to have to learn new things, and we're going to see him develop more. I like a lot of what I saw too, but there's also some things that he needed to improve. He held onto the ball a little too long still, I feel like, and there was that one possession where he stepped out of bounds, losing 4 yards, drifting out of bounds. So I like what I saw from both of these young quarterbacks in the 2024 draft, and I think that draft is going to show, after those 6 quarterbacks being drafted, to be one of the more talented draft classes that we've seen from the quarterback position. But it was a really good game in the NFC North, and the Vikings got the dub in division. So what did we learn from NFL Week 1? It's early and we're excited. And like I continue to say, don't overreact to everything, guys. We saw a lot of good performances throughout this week. I think for sure the Bills and Ravens game really encapsulates the feeling and the excitement of NFL football being back, that high-scoring matchup having a total of 81 points scored between the Bills and the Ravens. Then you have the Packers sending a message to the Detroit Lions. But even with the Lions not performing well too, we have to remember that they have 2 new coordinators and they're trying to get things back together there. I like how the 49ers won that game, but also they have some questions now with George Kittle being out for 3 to 5 weeks, and now Brock Purdy being questionable for week 2 with a toe and shoulder injury. That's something there, man. The 49ers fans do not want to hear that. But overall, though, man, this was a great week. Even the Eagles and Cowboys game, which we opened up the NFL season with too. I think those two teams right there are going to be playoff teams, and the NFC East has the potential of having 3 teams that'll make the playoffs. So I just like what I saw from both conferences. The Chargers looked good. The Steelers-Jets game was phenomenal as well. I'm just excited for the season, guys. And on Thursday, we'll have also an intriguing and great matchup potentially between the Green Bay Packers and the Washington Commanders on Thursday Night Football at Lambeau Field. So that's going to be great as well. But yeah, guys, y'all let me know in the comments down below, what did y'all learn from NFL Week 1 of this 2025 season? It's going to be a great season. And like I said, join me every single Tuesday of this season as we'll be having these recaps. I promise they won't be as long as this video, but this is Week 1, so I gave myself an editing pass on this. It's a long video, but of course we have these games broken down in chapters so you can navigate to your favorite teams or your favorite matchups and stuff like that too. But yeah, this is going to be an amazing season. Looking forward to it, and this is just the beginning. I can't also wait until we have the NBA and NFL simultaneously going on too. It's literally getting close to the peak pinnacle of sports time here, so I'm loving it, guys. But y'all keep being blessed. Make sure that y'all hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram /Twitter and X at SwaggyRuss, and TikTok at SwaggyRuss2 for shorts, reels, all types of content and things of that nature too as well. A lot more on the ways. In addition to these recaps, we're gonna be having more NBA content coming soon too, and a lot more NFL stuff too as well. So like I said, we're continuing to evolve and grow. I thank you for all the new people who have subscribe to my channel, and we're gonna keep going and doing legendary things, guys. So I'm so grateful for y'all always. Y'all keep being blessed. Keep Jesus Christ at the center of your life always. Know that he loves you. He has great purpose for you. Let his light shine through you and lead others towards Christ, guys. Y'all keep being blessed. Y'all have a good one. I love y'all, and keep being legendary. Peace.